development. So you see,
You may not, you may or may not call it marriage, but some label is necessary.
May perhaps not be, my lord, it's a loud thinking.
Yes.
I may not, my lord, dwell much on that.
I mean,
But
just
in principle, I must say, at the outset, as an officer of the court, that except any legal recognition of this form of cohabitation, either as a marriage or by any other
that's why
name.
we are right now not at, we are not at that, we are not pegging it at
If
that.
there
We
are
going
other,
step by step right
if
now.
there are other issues or concerns, no, they can be addressed on the
You
government.
have an income tax expert here. Yes. You have an AOP. You have a concept known as an AOP.
That's right.
You have a concept known as contract, concept known as partnership. These are
Again, my
illegally
lord,
recognized.
statutorily recognized and created.
Right. Point is, yes, I think the key to this is association. Although we have certain other things could creep in once you bring in 19(1)(c). But what you are saying in essence is they have a right to associate themselves. And in that association also means exclusion. In that relationship, there is no other person.
My lord, on that concern issue, my lord, I share the concern. My lord, government also, my lord, I don't think would not.
Exactly. You know, I don't think this will be an issue. That's why we thought that, you know, this should come from you, because I mean, ultimately, you know, we want some element of a broad sense of coalition, because we are also conscious about the fact that there's so much which representative democracy must also achieve in our country. Therefore, we'd be happy to get that kind of
My lord, I
assistance.
undertake, my lord, will.
And now take another thing. Today, forget that Kara circular for a moment. We're going to put it to Ms. Bhati later on. One of the couples in a same-sex relationship can adopt. No bar at all. It's lawful. Now, in such a situation, a child goes to school. Does the government want a situation where the child is essentially treated as a single-parent child? Or and you don't have to go as far as marriage in this as well. See, so we don't have to go for a all or broke approach, at least at this stage of the development of our social ethos. Would the child not have the benefit of the cohabitation between the two people who have in whose home that child resides? You know?
This is more, your lordships are right. I understand the concern your lordships have. If one can, my lord, why not two? Merely because they happen to be sharing the sex.
There is an issue there. And correct, I mean, concern. If there are two, then both have to be recognized. It can't be that one relates to one and the other one relates to the other. So both children are the children of both those parents. From your angle, there could be something else in your mind, which also, I mean, cannot be wished away. But at the same time, if this is normal for them.
Well, this is more a sociological problem.
Yes.
The rearing of the child, development of the child, maybe. My lord, these are all hypothetical situations, and my learned friend will deal
But they are
with it.
real life
No,
situations.
they are not hypothetical.
They are not hypothetical. They are real situations.
What I'm going to submit is a hypothetical situation. That there are studies which show that a single parent child, his growth is different and better than the child who does not see mother and father both. He sees either two men or two women. But the difficulty is this, and I'll very candidly share this. My lord, this movement, my lord, this kind of, my lord, orientation must be in existence since time immemorial. But this movement started in 2002, around 2002.
Actually, you know, Mr. Solicitor, it's the other way around. You see, it was the impact of British Victorian morality that we gave much of our that we had to forsake much of our cultural ethos. You go to some of our finest temples, which reflect the architecture.
I understand.
And even if you look at them, you'll never say that this is either, lurid or that it is depicts some emotion.
No, I was slightly on a different point.
It shows the depth of our culture. So what really happened?
It's a very layered culture that probably
It's
those layers
educative.
Actually,
Others
it was
immediately
intended to be educative.
And look at the great
It was very
profound,
pragmatic and educative.
look at the profound nature of our culture down the ages. What happened, unfortunately, was from 1857 and thereafter, and you got the Indian Penal Code, for instance, we imposed, as it were, a code of British Victorian morality on a completely different culture. And our culture was extraordinarily inclusive, very broad, and which is possibly one of the reasons why our religion survived even foreign invasions, because of the inclusion, the sense of
elasticity
tolerance,
of the culture.
the breadth and the profound nature of
Correct,
our culture.
absolutely. I was on a slightly different point.
So, the reason why I'm saying this, Mr. Solicitor, is this, that there are so many issues in which you can, in that sense, we also understand our limitations as a court. I mean, there's no question about it. But there are so many issues in which, for instance, of course, you have made your argument on the legislative side, but there are so many issues on which, on the administrative side, your ministry
I take it, my lord, and your
can
concern.
find real solutions to these problems, and maybe we can be acting as facilitators to achieve these
Certainly, my
solutions.
lord, and there, my lord, there would not be any adversarial stand.
And the relationship of the court with the government in that sense is not really an adversarial relationship.
Cannot
so
be,
much
and
the work
especially
which
in
we
a
do.
matter involving human.
We're constantly, especially on socio-economic matters, we are pushing the government. We are asking them, come on, come back. Give us.
So I'll speak to my lord at an appropriate level and respond.
We may not have a model within us, and it may not be appropriate for us to devise that model.
Okay, absolutely.
But we can certainly tell the government, but now look, our law has gone so far now. Now, within what our law has recognized, can we not ensure that, there is a certain degree of...
Class-specific problems can be addressed to and attended with a view to solving the human issues. I understand.
Day-to-day issue.
See, look at it from another angle. You have shown us the international scene. Unlike in other countries, there has been no prohibition for this kind of marriage, right? In that sense, except 377, which criminalized this.
We didn't have any law.
We did not have any law. So, which means that society by and large was where it stood. It was accepting the way things were. But now we have progressed somewhere. We have decriminalized it, and there is some sense of that identity. That identity, how do you handle it as a democratic government and as a system?
As my lord, the Chief Justice, my lord, said that as a social welfare measure or as a welfare state. How?
And, Solicitor, look at it this way. Despite the government's stated position on affidavit before us, we have a law as far-reaching as a transgender act.
Lord, kindly have a look at
It's a law of
transgender.
2019, and look at the vision of that legislation.
Lord, kindly have a look at it.
This is, see, just to supplement what the Chief Justice has said, we had a Vishaka. Vishaka was limited in its application to public sector and the state agencies, and rules were amended. Eventually, that got assimilated, and it's a wider enactment which applies to all establishments. This provided different mechanisms which even the court could not visualize. Then domestic violence was also, the enactment was a result of some movement, sustained campaign, etc. Then came the Transgender Act, which is also, in that sense, this constant collaboration has been happening.
Certainly, my lord. My lord, on Vishaka, I have separate, my lord, a limb of submissions because that was a
You're right.
complete vacuum.
You're absolutely
That was
right.
an absolute vacuum.
And I tell you, Vishaka was an
It
easier.
was a regulatory mechanism
Another thing you see,
of an admitted fundamental.
another thing, Vishaka deals with an issue, a social issue which does not have interlinkages. You have sexual harassment in the workplace. You have models of disciplinary inquiries, which is a part of our jurisprudence. So what we did was we internalized that, created, the sexual gender sensitization committees. Complaint will be heard by the gender sensitization committee, and that person will be dealt with. Okay, so it was it was a workplace. It was defined by a physical workplace. So it was much easier.
The identifiable class, identifiable inhabitation, and identifiable issue.
So the
So it
canvas
is-
was smaller.
And therefore, it was open to the court there to say, as our court said, that in view of CEDAW, pending the creation of legislation, this is what the framework that we will adopt. This case is much more difficult for us to do that because, it's not that, you have just one silo. These are not silos. These are, these have linkages everywhere.
It's a consent order, my lord. If you look at-
Succession, adoption, maintenance, everything. So.
Even domestic violence, there was a felt need. Otherwise, the legislation has gone this far as to recognize live-in relationships, a right to residence. So there can be situations where the live-in relationship, the person in a living relationship who lives for a long time might well get back if she is thrown out. She might get an order for coming back to the same house where both the man and his wife are living. Now, there's a recognition, there's a right to residence and all the other rights around it. So it's not as if things are working in their own silos. That too has linkages with family law.
Correct, my lord. But my lord,
And-
that
When we say
it will have
recognition-
to, my lord.
When we say recognition, shouldn't always mean recognition as marriage.
May not.
And Mr.
Recognition
Solicitor, when
of
you are-
It means
Yeah.
association
Yes.
which should entitle them to certain benefits.
You
or
know,
recognition. That's all.
Mr.
Not to say that once we say that once we have accepted the identity and association of two persons should not automatically mean that their association is actually equated to marriage.
Common parlance.
You know, Mr. Solicitor, the old Privy Council principle, long cohabitation itself raises the presumption of marriage. Why? Because in the olden times, I mean, I don't think at least in our parental, you're much younger than all of us, but in our parental time,
Don't look.
where were the
Either of us.
where were the marriage
For
certificate?
either of us, that
Tell us,
statement
where
is
were the
wrong.
marriage certificate? Where were the registration? Mr. Dwivedi just said that he doesn't have a registration.
That why.
Who had the so therefore we developed the concept of the presumption of marriage out of long cohabitation, and that has something that's a very important principle which we have adopted. So if there is in that sense, we are not going to marriage right now at all right, that's not the purpose. But therefore I think the reason why we are trying to push you to this, and let's be very candid about it also, the reason
And
why
he
we are
is
pushing
also
the
in line
government to
with-
this
Is
is
actually
because
in line with
we
policy.
take your point that look, if the court were to go into the legislative arena, you've made a very powerful argument on that look, you'll be legislating. This is not your remit. This is for Parliament or the state legislatures under entry 5 as we put up front. But short of that, our law has gone so far now. Now, what does the government want to do to ensure that these cohabitatory relationships, if I can call it that, the relationships based on cohabitation, on association, Brother Narasimha says, they must be recognized in terms of creating conditions of security, social welfare, and to ensure by doing that, we also ensure that for the future, that these relationships cease to be ostracized in society.
No, that is transgender sex. I can show, my lord, the entire scheme.
Solicitor, I would like to pose a question. See, with the decriminalization which took place,
Yes.
obviously this was indirectly a recognition that such a status can prevail. Once such a status can prevail, logically, I would think that different social ministries would have possibly, I don't know, would like to know, gone into a study of how to tackle these very other problems which would arise from a continuation of such status. After all, when you say living in relationship, that's also not given any other sanctity, but the social legislation took into account that aspect. So when you talk about a homosexual relationship and people staying and decriminalization coming out of the closet, the next question would have been, how will different legislation areas where interest would be involved of two people or more than two people, like the adoption case you justice talked about, would have logically, to my mind, given a thought in the ministries to think about it. Has such a thought process prevailed? Because I at the cost of repetition, agreeing with the chief, feel that this is, let's not transpose the Victorian philosophy as our original civilizational philosophy. That would certainly be difficult to accept. So you may also check up whether any thought process has been worked out in the concerned ministries dealing with such aspects, or any thought process has been given to it in the last 5 years.
Yes, well, once it has fallen from your lordships, it's my duty. I'll point out and I'll my lord, find out and respond. But my lord,
And
in my
Solicitor,
submission, my lord, in my understanding,
we'll request you on this to assist us in a non-adversarial way.
and my lord,
I will request you to assist us in a non-adversarial way on this.
Yes,
issue.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Lord, the elimination of the problems faced by them, Lord, regarding, my lord, as pointed out, my lord,
Human angle.
nomination,
The human angle.
a human angle. That, Lord, anything, and my lord, but your lordship's decriminalization would not, my lord, be understood and has not been understood by the government also as a recognition of any status. Apropos, my lord Justice calls, my lord, query that your lordship decriminalized a particular activity which was till then an offense, but that did not give any status to the relationship.
No, it recognized the existence of this situation.
Yes,
It recognizes that it's no more a criminal activity, it's an existence of a relationship, existence of a situation.
and that can continue. There is no prohibition against that continuance of the
Listen,
activity.
when we say that a live-in
No,
relationship,
there are large number, I'm sorry.
no, a live-in relationship also, in a sense, falls in that category where you say that there may not be any marriage, may not be recognition, but certain obligations would follow. Similarly, gay people living together may not be married, decriminalized, open. Such situation would prevail where problems are bound to arise in different aspects of legislation or social requirements.
Yes, my lord.
That's what I wanted to know. Considering the social requirement, like examples given, whether of bank accounts, of adoption, of so many other things, the inconsistency which would come in when such people come out into the open, is an aspect I thought maybe the government had thought about it, something about it.
Yes, I'll find out and respond. But
Assuming they haven't. it
But, my
can-
lord, I make it clear that
You can
I would, my
cite
lord,
them.
assist the honorable court, qua,
Yes.
my lord, so far as possible and legally permissible, the removal of the problems they are facing.
Barriers, actually.
Not, yes, my lord, not, my
And
lord,
somewhere, some semantics have to be.
without any legal or statutory recognition.
Solicitor, one caveat is necessary. When you do remove it, the semantics of it are equally important. How do you treat them?
Yes, yes.
You may or may not call them spouse. But nowadays, there's a more